Working with candidates over time, I noticed this trend that it's oftentimes they wish they better understood the question they were asked. Okay, and if you're an outsider to these things, you'd say, but hey, it's just normal, you want to understand the question before answering it, otherwise how would you answer it? Well, it turns out that in job interviews during the heat of the moment, some candidates, and a good amount of candidates, have a tendency to be more reactive, to try to maybe please the interviewer and try, make not sound as, hey, I'm not dumb, I didn't understand the question you're asked. However, there are, various scenarios where you simply couldn't hear it because the internet connection didn't work, or you couldn't understand their English. Okay, this is perfectly normal as well. Or question maybe was too long to remember and you forgot the first part, which was the most important. And it could also happen that the question itself is badly formulated. Okay, so it's not excluded that the question itself doesn't really make sense, because nowadays, when most interview questions you could find online, people have to improvise. Interviewers have to improvise, and especially in some companies with bar raisers, they have to find their own questions. Okay, and when you try to improvise your own questions, there is a possibility that your question might not be well formed, right? So it's perfectly possible that the question itself doesn't make sense. Okay, so this is an extra reason for you to pay attention to this type of advice. What if you don't understand the question? What are your options here? Okay, let's start with the obvious stuff. You will ask them to repeat the question they asked you. Okay, this is normal advice, applies to anyone. I won't insist on that. Other people prefer to ensure they understand the question by also writing it down in full. This also covers the scenario where the question maybe is a long one and you want to remember the whole thing. Okay, or you could also employ an approach as to take your time to answer the question you're getting asked, to introduce a delay there. The cost of taking your time is you might not be perceived as a super convincing candidate. I always like to give this example of politicians. They never take their time to answer questions. They rather answer it on the spot, even reactively, because they want to sound, they have punch, they want to sound as convincing as possible. However, if that's not necessarily your goal in a job interview, you could take your time to answer the question, right? And therefore significantly improve your chances that you also understood the question in the first place. Okay? And the fourth point I want to talk about here, what can you do about this, is to simply ask clarifying questions. Okay, so very few candidates ask clarifying questions in job interviews. Okay, so I'd like to maybe give you an example here. Let's say you're applying for a software engineer role, right? And someone throws a question during an interview, how do you manage? Simple as that. It's a question, So how would you go around answering how do you manage as a software engineer? Right? So maybe useful if you could, ask a few clarifying questions. Hey, in my job as a software engineer, I have to manage many aspects of my job, such as I have to prioritize my time, I have to prioritize various stuff, or I have to manage, different components of the software of the project that I'm working on. So which of these experiences would you be particularly interested in, right? So asking clarifying questions, and Google interviewers encourage candidates to ask clarifying questions. So by asking these clarifying questions, you do significantly increase your chances. You also properly understand the question, and even more interestingly for you, why they ask the question. Because in a job interview, if you understand why the question gets asked, you are far more likely to give them what they're actually looking for, right? So long story short, ensure you do understand the question you're getting asked, and ideally even why, because more often than not, this is an often overlooked aspect of job interviews. So hopefully you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.